A Billion Suns, Interstellar Fleet Battles by Mike Hutchinson. We're going back to the well. I'm sorry, let me slip back into the corporate speak. Welcome to your annual review. We're trying to determine whether or not you are worthy of promotion as a rule set to the corner office. And spoiler alert, we're not going to be adding this to the regular rotation for reasons that we'll get into in a little bit. But it is a wonderful game. It's a delightful game. It has a reputation, at least from what I gather around the digital water cooler, for being a game that is less than the sum of its parts. In other words, there's a lot of really good individual subsystems in here that don't quite gel into a cohesive whole. When you step away from the table, you wind up feeling like it's just missing that je ne sais quoi. And we're going to try to put a name on that sais quoi today and define what it is that really works about this game, what doesn't, and what you may be able to do with it in the future, what we may do with it in the future here on the channel. Before I get into A Billion Suns, though, there's a couple of caveats. We got to put a couple of big, fat asterisks on this review. I have played 3 games of solo A Billion Suns using the free upgrade available at planetsmasher.com. Ha! I looked it up. Almost like a real reviewer. planetsmashergames.com. He's got a lot of downloads, including a print off your own. And would you look at this? This is your command helm. It's got, it even has like a quick reference sheet. This, you would be astonished to learn. This Osprey Wargames Blue Book has useful quick reference sheets. I know, I'll wait while you collect your jaws off the floor. And this is a really helpful tool. You can print those off. It's also got Arc of Fire and measuring tool. I don't use those because it's basically, it's like, is it 45 degrees? Is it 33 or 90 degrees out of the front? Is it 3 inches to the front? I'm not going to go through the rules specifically, but I think it is worth pointing out that I don't have a direct experience in head-to-head games of A Billion Suns. It might play very differently. In fact, I can almost guarantee it does for a lot of reasons that I won't go into because I don't have the experience to do that. I can speak to the solo play rules, but before I do, I want to shift gears a little bit. And I want to talk a little bit about some fantasy skirmish games. You might have heard of them. There's a little game called Frostgrave by Joseph A. McCullough. It's into the 2nd edition, maybe even 3rd by now. Again, started life as a Osprey Blue Book series, and it has gone with the full, like, bespoke hardcover treatment. It's an interesting game because it is a capture the resources game. And there's a certain meta game on top of that Frostgrave where you could go into a scenario. Oh, look, there's 2 treasures here, 2 treasures there. You can say to the guy across from the table, hey, look, nobody needs to get hurt today. You take those 2 treasures, I'll take these 2. We can go in, do our business, and get out. Nobody needs to get hurt. A 2-player game of A Billion Suns could very easily work the same way. You can negotiate with your competitor for a trade agreement and play that out. Now, you would still need to play the game out because there will come a point, particularly if you are playing a campaign game, where who wins the campaign is going to come down to who is going to Ribbentrop whom first. And if they do that stellar diplomacy stab in the back at the right time and to the right depth to finally tip the game over into the balance. So there may be a whole new metagame analysis that you could do for A Billion Suns 2-player. I invite some of the people who are better at this than me and who have like real life friends to experiment with that and get back to us because I'd like to learn that. On the side, why am I talking about I should point out that you could even do the same thing with the solo rules for A Billion Suns, where you bring 2 fleets of ships in, you and your friends, and go a little Rangers of Shadowdeep and play through a nice little campaign with 2 players. You just have to add a few more independent contractors. And that might be a fascinating way to play this game. I think there's a wonderful toolkit built in here, and at the end of the day, I recommend you pick up a copy because it is an interesting game. Going back to the solo rules, old Crikey Miles himself, Mike Hutchinson, pointed out that I found a mistake in the solo rules. And when you are playing a solo game, so let me flip to a specific reference page here. When you're playing a two-player game, one of the things you have to be aware of is what is the total amount of revenue available. If you're playing a scale 3 game, there's $36 available, and that plays into the solo game. If you can net $18 worth of victory points, you're doing really well, my friend. But there's an odd quirk where the 20 to 35% is more valuable. You get more rewards for earning 20 to 35% of this maximum than you do for getting above 50%. That disappears at higher level, which means that there's a little bit of, what would you say? You get a little bit of a bonus. It's a little easier to win the campaign, to earn a little bit more of a power up, and to increase your power level at the lower scales than at the upper scales, which is brilliant game design. Advertent or inadvertent doesn't matter. It's a wonderful little mechanic that I hadn't noticed until Mike showed up in the comment section and pointed that out. And of course, he's humble almost to a fault. He's developed some just astonishingly wonderful games, and he should stop being so humble, because he just should. He has earned his bragging rights here in the House of Wargaming. Okay, so with that said, I've already spent enough time complaining about how many ships are necessary to play A Billion Suns, but we found a way to overcome that. Cardboard counters work just fine. I want to talk about another aspect of the game that I think is simply brilliant, and that's the shooting phase and how shooting works. It may seem a little counterintuitive because when you are, and I'll once again go directly to the shooting phase of the rules so you can see some pretty artwork here. You have a wonderful chart with weapon systems here. And I specifically want to key in on this because I think this is just some brilliant game design. Every ship that you fire at has a silhouette score. You're trying to roll that or less in order to hit. The weaker guns are more accurate. You see how you're rolling D6s? You're more likely to roll lower than the silhouette when you're firing these weaker guns. However, most of the larger ships also have a shield value, and whatever die roll you're attacked with, you roll that to see if you roll below your shield value. In the case of a capital ship, it might have a shield value of 5, which means plinking away at it with these hyper-accurate weapons isn't going to do you much good, particularly given the fact that the D6 weapons only do 1 damage. Yeah, you're going to hit, but when you make your damage roll, because it's the fired upon ship that's making the shield check, it's more of a damage save, he's rolling D6s. You're only going to get a couple of hits, and you're not going to punch through his shields. Maybe you do 1 or 2 points of damage, so it might be worth it once in a while. But at the other end of the scale, you've got these massive guns, a macro beam, which only rolls 2d12. That means you don't want to be shooting at ships that have a silhouette of 3 or 4. You're only hitting 25 to 30% of the time. If you're firing at a ship that's got a silhouette of 5 or even 7, 8, then you're going to be hitting more than half the time. And when you hit, you are going to just be hammering with damage of 5. Then consider the fact that your opponent now has to make that same check. So each hit requires a save. And if the save, again, they've got pretty good shields, so 5 or 6, but if they fail that save, it's going to be harder to... You have the wider spread, so even though you're saving on a 1 through 5, you're rolling a d12, you're going to be failing that more than half the time. And when you fail, you are taking big damage. So these huge guns are much more likely to hit capital ships. These are not designed for targeting the little fighters. That's what you have a defense grid for. 4d8, still not terribly accurate, but you don't need to hit a whole lot. You get 4 chances, and every one that punches through shields, fighters don't have shields. Every time you hit a fighter, I'm rolling 3d8. I'm looking for 3s or less. I'm going to get at least 1 or 2 hits. Each of those hits is going to do 2 damage. I'm knocking those fighters out of the sky. I'm swatting them like flies. But we're not done with the genius. That defense grid is for knocking out ships that have to get to within 6 inches to shoot you. Well, I can hit them at 9 inches. I may be able to stand off and get a shot at them before they're even within range. When they get in range of their guns, they're in range of my guns. The big guns over here have a minimum range of 12. That photon torpedo needs time to arm before it can be effective. Now, there's something very clever about this, because remember that the speed of the capital ships is going to be measured in 2 to 4 inches. It's really hard to get into firing position, but you don't have to spend as much time moving there because you have this big 24-inch range. Just absolutely brilliant, the way all of these little rules fit together. And at the end of the day, all you have to remember is I'm rolling a handful of die types against a silhouette, and then whichever one's hit, he's got to roll against his shield value. So it's 2 dice rolls, couple of target numbers, very easy. And you have all of this flavor between the little pukey ships that should really be taking care of themselves versus these big capital ships who, again, are targeting themselves. So really good. And then the system by which you've got escort ships, a fighter escort of one of these big vessels chasing off the other fighters that might come a little bit too close. Total chef's kiss. I think this is wonderful. I would love to see this game played, and I got to be honest with you, I made the mistake of throwing away my cardboard counters before I had this idea. I'd love to see this. Throw some asteroids onto the table. Go ahead and purchase, say, 100 points worth of ships. I don't know. I haven't run the numbers. Maybe you do 75. So I can take a cruiser and a monitor and a handful of corvettes and a bunch of fighters, or I can take a carrier and a destroyer, maybe a battleship and a couple of escorts. I think that your fleet composition for about a 75-point battle is going to look very similar to what you would see in something like Full Thrust, where you've got 1 or 2 big capital ships, maybe 3 of the smaller capital ships, and then a larger number of corvettes, and then a larger number of these fighter wings zipping about causing trouble. I think that just using these as just using the regular standard point buy, and maybe we'll try this here in a few weeks. I'll wait until I have actual proper miniatures and a proper sized table to experiment with this. But I really think this could be a wonderful little game. Now, again, big fat asterisk. Mike has already prepared a little thing called Warzone. My understanding is that Warzone is more of a militarized focus on the economic warfare, but I'm not here to review Warzone. I'm just here to review the rules as they are written, and I think they're really clever. Special thanks to commenter John Scar for pointing this out. This could be the most accurate representation of naval warfare, space or terrestrial base, that we've seen so far, because you have these economic factors confounding everything. You very rarely see fleets in the real world do a stand-up fight. Midway was a surprise, specifically because it was such a stand-up battle. Jutland, again, these stand-up battles are not standard. The much more likely battles, the battles you're much more likely to see are battles where you've got blockade runners, or you've got or the fight is taking place over a specific resource. Control of a harbor, control of mining resources, and by giving us this elegant little contract system where you are fighting over fishing rights for the space whales, where you're fighting over who's going to get to the mine and to the asteroid, blow it up and steal the ore first, where you've got these rescue missions. I'm trying to hack my enemy. I've got spies I'm trying to fish out. Now, these largely took place more, say, during the colonial era, where you've got these drop-offs and pickups. But when I think about the stories that I've read in Horatio Hornblower, supply missions, I got to get these supplies into a hostile port. or I've got to pull lifeboats away from a in this case, an installation that's falling apart, or in the case of warfare, when I read books like Dan O'Brien, the kind of conflicts that you see in here, I see those in the books that I read, the semi-historical or historical fiction books. And most of those, we all know Dan O'Brien was meticulous with his research. Most of the things that happened were he took bits and pieces from real history and stitched them together. And, so I think that this is an interesting way to set up victory conditions, and you can kind of close your eyes and not worry so much about the economic aspect of things. So again, it's a wonderful little system that works terribly well. The one thing that I'm not completely sold on is this concept of the tactical versus the orders that you've got. And by that, I mean on a given turn, when you activate a battle group, you can give each of them one order. Do you want to be a mover? Do you want to be a shooter, a fixer, or just jumping out? You got to pick one of these orders. And then those orders take place in different phases. And then as you are executing whatever order you have executed, so these are kind of like power-ups. I don't think you have to give an order to a particular battleship, or a battle group, I should say, a collection of ships of the same size that have group coherency. But as I'm going through that, now we also have this other system of command tokens that, okay, so if we have, this is the most obvious. If you issue the vector movement, each ship can make an additional move action. So similar to running when we're dealing with terrestrial combat. And then I can issue power to engines. So once, spend a command token to double the thrust value for the rest of its activation. So not only do I move twice, but I move twice as far each time I move. All right, so that's like 2 power-ups, and this is where things start to break down a little bit, because you have, on the one hand, it gives you a whole lot of flexibility, but on the other hand, and it's just like 2 different rounds of power-up seems a bit excessive to me. It's one more layer of complexity that is beyond me. Now, I suppose we should probably back up a step, and we'll look at the pretty picture of the pretty spaceship here, because we all like that. This is the space combat version of the centerfold, right? I will say this for Mike Hutchinson. He very carefully calibrates the cognitive load of his games. And if we look back to what happened with the solo games that we played, you'll find that the movement and the shooting and the activations for the AI player, if you will, simplifies things. Okay, so hold on. So I don't have to think about what the motivations are for my AI opponent. It's all spelled out in the algorithm that we've been provided. Not only that, but this 2-tiered power-up system where I have to choose, do I want to use vector movement and then use a command token to be better at shooting? That doesn't apply to any of the NPCs. Even moving is simple. You figure out where they're going, and then you just move them their maximum thrust, and they point to the nearest ship, and then they attack if they can. It's literally that easy. However, so that's easy. We've scaled back the cognitive load, but then we ramp it back up. So we've taken a step back, and then we step back up because we're flooding the zone with so many more AI opponents. And so we keep seeing that throughout this game. That Mike says, look, I understand this is a little complicated, so I'm gonna scale back on the movement. I'm gonna make this. We're not gonna worry about Laplace, Newton, and Lagrange. We're just gonna, do the usual little snaky shooting. Okay, now that that's simpler, I can buy it back over here. And to be honest with you, if I had 2 hours to kill with a friend sitting across the table, I think it is note perfect for the amount of load that you can carry, that I could carry. I'm not going to be playing this game on the camera anymore because it is so perfect. Like if I was sitting by a roaring fire with my big dog sitting on my left foot and the little dog sitting on my right foot, and a little cognac over here, and the wife ready, standing by with back rubs, and maybe I don't know, a pipe. I don't even smoke a pipe, but I just in this scenario that I've got, and I've got 2 hours to just work through all of these algorithms and take my time, and all I have to think about is enjoying just soaking in the hot tub of one of a billion suns. It's great. For my part, and this might not apply to you if you don't have a YouTube channel, I need a game for dullards, because I'm also, while I'm playing this game, I'm thinking about, well, how does this game work? I'm trying to take it apart to its constituent parts so I can prepare a video like this one. I'm also trying to maintain a consistent patois. I am play-by-play announcer, and I'm doing my own color commentary, and I found that this game, and you saw, we've done 3 of these videos. The first one was an hour long. That was a scale 3 fight. A scale 4 fight was an hour and 5 minutes. The scale 5 was an hour and 10-minute long video, double that for the time it took to actually film it. And one of the reasons I bailed out is that my laptop, to be quite frank with you, is not powerful enough. It took like 8 hours to process that video. So not only is it a little too much for my brain to play this game on camera once you get up beyond scale 5, but it's also too long for my video. This is my way of saying, do not take the fact that I won't be showing you any more of these unless I do a silly little meme game where I take out bits and pieces. For example, just do a straight up line them up and fight. I'll buy 60 points worth of battle. You have ships and throw them at each other in an asteroid belt. Or you could even do just simple missions. Fleet A has 80 points, and it needs to destroy that installation over there. Actually, give them a little bit less, right? Because this is one of the other things that, well, I'm sorry, let me finish the thought. The attackers have 60 points worth of ships. They have to destroy the installation. The defenders have 75. They have to prevent it. Why do the defenders have so many more points? Because they got to cover a wider swath. And because they have to kill everybody, where the attackers don't. They just have to kill that one largely defenseless ship. Now, maybe you give it some point defense, so that when a ship gets within 6 inches, it can shoot back. But I think you get my meaning, that you can have some objectives and use this as a straight line them up and fight. Now, what I was going to say is, one of the other reasons I think this is a really accurate depiction of modern warfare is, this is a game of the lowest bidder. In most naval matters, because navies are so expensive, the politicians don't spend the money it takes to win the fight. They spend just as much money as it takes to win the fight, and not a dime more. So curiously, this is an engine for creating well-balanced fights, just because each player doesn't want to spend any money, the same way that, well, at least not on military matters, in much the same manner that politicians don't. So again, we have a very accurate game. There's just a lot to recommend this, and I can't recommend it enough, despite the heavy lift. If you've got a sizable collection of space fighter miniatures, throw down. I would argue that you don't even need the fighter figures. You could do one of the tricks we used to use back in the day is, here, look, here's a wing of 3 fighters. Although you might want to use a D8 so that you can point the direction, right? Here, look. See this D3? See how it's a triangle? We know which way it's pointing now. It's a 3 because there's 3 fighters in there. On the one hand, you're limiting like how much ground is covered by that fighter wing, but on the other hand, you're making it harder to target these guys because they're flying in a tight Blue Angel formation. There's all kinds of ways that you can overcome these challenges that Mike has presented by giving us such a big, sprawling game like this. I can't imagine playing a game with that few ships. I think that's hysterical. That's a good-looking planet, man. I definitely would supply. So yeah, the art is good in this book. I just there's so much good stuff in here, and I think the game has an undeserved reputation. So I wanted to film this to kind of provide a bunch of excuses and a bunch of reasons why you shouldn't be afraid to pick up a copy, and just once again go into a little bit more detail on how delightful this is. The activations here. Look at the clever design here. First you issue your orders, then you move, then you got to eat shots from your friends, and then you jump out. Well, why isn't jump out after move? Because this gives you that one last chance of, you can park your vessels in front of a jump point and say to your friend, come at me. You want to get out of here? You're going to have to come through my passive defenses. Putting the jump out step before passive attacks eliminates that ability. Putting it after the active attack before the active attack step means that once I get to the jump out point, I got to choose. Am I going to really leave, or am I going to take that one last pot shot? I can't go in, take a shot, and then jump out. Right? And then we get to the scan step, which this is the one that just, I can be honest with you. This step 6 scan, this infuriated me while I was playing, but mostly because if you were to put the scan step at step 2, then it changes the very nature of the game. Scan step means you got to commit, buddy. You can't just scan and then go, don't like it, I'm outie. You got to get in there and you got to commit. It's going to be until the next turn. And remember, you only have, in some of these scenarios, some of these objectives, you only got 3 turns to do it. So I get in and I scan. I can't even start taking steps to do the objective until turn number 2. If I'm trying to scan for, to hack a ComSat, I'm parked there and I'm giving my opponent a full turn to knock me out of the sky before I've successfully hacked the AI in the ComSat. This is just, it like I said, it infuriates me, but it's so clever, and it's supposed to. It's maddening because it's such a challenge to deal with the scan step put right here. So it's definitely a love-hate relationship. I love to hate Mike for making my life so difficult. But again, right, the games are a unnecessary challenge that you willingly accept. So, and Mike is one of the best at developing those. So hopefully this little review and overview and deep delve into a couple of the 3 little subsystems of this game has been a help for you. You know what it reminds me of? A little bit with the different types of dice that handle shooting differently. It reminds me of Silent Death, which is bar none my favorite fighter game. I should do a whole video on Silent Death. Iron Crown came out with it in 91, and I just fell in love, and I couldn't play enough of it back in the early 90s. Came back out about 20 years later with the Nostalgia Bros, and I'm thinking we're about due for another one. If you know that you can still get your hands on a copy of the rules, let me know, because I might pick up some of those cheap knockoff sculpts from the rubber China plant, or the rubber figures from China that are grossly oversized, but they're very cheap, and I gotta wonder if this mechanic was inspired by Silent Death because it works so well. Anyway, I feel like I'm kind of rambling now, so I'm going to close out. Great game. You should pick up a copy, play around with it. Take it apart, see for yourself, try it with some friends. You'll have some experiences that are unlike what we've seen here on the table, and maybe even use miniatures. Wouldn't that be exciting? Maybe we'll do that here on the channel here in a few weeks. No promises, but I'd like to, because there's still untapped depths I have not fully explored. Thank you for your patience. Till next time, I'm praying for you.